Have you ever felt it? That sudden, overwhelming wave of familiarity in a place you've never been? The feeling that you've lived this exact moment before. The words someone is about to say, the way the light hits the wall, the faint scent in the air. We call it déjà vu, a French term meaning already seen. Scientists tell us it's a simple trick of the mind. A brief hiccup in our brain's complex filing system, where a new experience is accidentally routed through our long-term memory first. A harmless glitch, a momentary confusion. But what if it's not? What if that feeling isn't a memory of the past, but a bleed-through from a future you're hurtling towards? Or worse, a memory that doesn't belong to you at all? Tonight, we're not talking about the science. We're delving into the shadows, into stories where that harmless little glitch becomes a terrifying warning, a prison, or a sign of something truly nightmarish. These are 4 allegedly true stories from people who experienced déjà vu and wished they hadn't. Our first story is about how a fleeting moment of familiarity can mean the difference between life and death. It comes from a man named Alex, who was a college student back in the early 2000s on a cross-country road trip with 2 of his closest friends. It was the perfect trip. 3 friends, a beat-up but reliable sedan, a map full of destinations, and the endless promise of the open road. They were somewhere in the vast, flat plains of Nevada, about 2 days into their journey. Alex was in the passenger seat, half asleep, with the radio playing softly. That's when it hit him. Not slowly, but like a switch being flipped. He was suddenly wide awake, his heart pounding. He knew, with absolute certainty, what was about to happen. The song on the radio would end. His friend, Mark, who was driving, would make a bad joke about tumbleweeds. And then, a dark green 18-wheeler with a distinctive rust pattern on its side would crest the hill in the distance and drift, just slightly, into their lane. He sat frozen, a prisoner in his own mind, as it all unfolded. The song ended. Mark chuckled and said, "I swear, I've seen more tumbleweeds than cars out here." Alex's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the hill ahead, and there it was. A dark green truck pulling into view just as he'd seen it. The rust pattern on the side was like a birthmark he recognized instantly. It was the most intense, vivid sensation of déjà vu he had ever felt. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a full-body experience. He could feel the phantom vibration of the impact. He shook his head, trying to clear it. It was just the long hours on the road, the heat, the monotony. A brain fart. That's all. The truck was still far away, and it was holding its lane perfectly fine. He relaxed his shoulders, took a deep breath, and told himself he was being ridiculous. They drove for another hour. They switched the music, talked about their plans for when they reached California. The feeling faded, and Alex almost forgot about it. They pulled off for gas, stretched their legs, and got back on the road. Now, their third friend, Sarah, was driving, and Alex was in the back. He was looking out the window, watching the landscape blur by, when the feeling returned. This time, it was 1,000 times stronger, a tidal wave of terror. The same song came on the radio, the station was on a loop. He saw the same stretch of road ahead, the same gentle curve. His heart hammered against his ribs. He leaned forward between the front seats and saw the hill. He knew what was coming. He wasn't just remembering a moment. He was reliving it. "Pull over," he said, his voice quiet. Sarah glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "What? Why? There's nothing here. Just, please pull over. Now." The green truck appeared, cresting the hill. It was the exact same truck. The same rust, the same angle of the sun glinting off its windshield. It was impossible, but it was happening. "Alex, what is wrong with you?" Mark said from the passenger seat. But Alex wasn't listening. He was screaming, "Pull over! Stop the car! Now!" His panic was so genuine, so primal, that Sarah reacted without thinking. She slammed on the brakes and swerved onto the dusty shoulder of the road. They jolted to a stop, confused and angry. And just as Mark turned to yell at Alex, the green 18-wheeler, which had been perfectly in its lane just a second ago, blew a front tire. The massive vehicle careened wildly, jackknifing across both lanes of the highway, its trailer whipping around with enough force to obliterate anything in its path. It skidded, metal screaming against asphalt, before finally crashing into the ditch on the other side of the road, right where they would have been if they hadn't stopped. Silence. The three of them sat in the car, shaking, watching the dust settle. They were alive. Alex's premonition, his terrifying bout of déjà vu, had saved them. He hadn't just remembered a moment. He had been given a warning, a glimpse into a timeline where they weren't so lucky. It's a profound example of how these moments can be more than just a memory glitch. For some, they are an instance of profound, unexplained phenomena. Alex's story is a premonition that saved him. But what happens when the déjà vu doesn't offer a way out? What happens when it becomes the cage itself? This brings us to the story of a woman named Maria and an experience that felt less like a warning and more like a terrifying glitch in the Matrix. Maria lived alone in a small but comfortable city apartment. Her life was one of routine, and she liked it that way. Get up, make coffee, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. One Tuesday morning, her routine was shattered. She was in her kitchen, getting her morning coffee ready. She reached into the cupboard for her favorite blue mug. As her fingers touched the ceramic, her hand slipped, and the mug fell to the tile floor, shattering into a dozen pieces. She sighed, annoyed. She cleaned up the mess, used a different mug, and went about her day, thinking nothing more of it. The next morning, Wednesday, she walked into her kitchen. She opened the cupboard to get a mug. She reached for her second favorite yellow one this time, remembering that the blue one was broken. But as her fingers brushed against it, she was hit with a dizzying, nauseating sense of déjà vu. She knew this moment, the exact angle of the sun through the window, the low hum of the refrigerator, the feeling of the cool tile on her bare feet. She knew her hand was about to slip. Fighting against the feeling, she deliberately gripped the mug tighter, her knuckles white. She carefully lifted it from the shelf and placed it firmly on the counter. She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. A strange, close call. But she'd broken the loop. She turned to the coffee maker. When she turned back, the yellow mug was gone. In its place, on the floor, were the shattered remains of her favorite blue mug. Panic began to set in. This wasn't possible. She had cleaned that up yesterday. She checked the trash can. It was empty. It was as if the last 24 hours hadn't happened. Was she losing her mind? She chalked it up to stress, cleaned up the mess again, and tried to force herself through her day, but a sense of dread followed her everywhere. Thursday morning, she stood at the threshold of her kitchen, terrified to enter. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Everything was normal. She opened the cupboard. Both the blue and yellow mugs were gone now. She reached for a plain white one. The feeling hit her again. The sun, the hum, the cold tile. The phantom feeling of a mug slipping from her grasp. She slammed the cupboard door shut, her heart racing. "No," she whispered. "This isn't real." She backed out of the kitchen, her eyes wide. As she did, she glanced at the dark reflection in the screen of her microwave. And for a split second, she saw a figure standing behind her. A tall, slender shadow with no discernible features. She spun around, nothing. She was alone. But she wasn't. The déjà vu wasn't a loop of her own actions. It was a signal. It was the moment the thing in her apartment chose to replay. Every morning, she was given a choice: play out the scene or defy it. But defying it only seemed to make it angry. The story goes that Maria's loop continued. Every morning, the same scenario. Sometimes she would break the mug. Sometimes she'd prevent it. But every time she felt the déjà vu, she also felt the presence behind her, growing stronger, closer. The last anyone heard from her was a frantic voicemail to her sister, saying she was trapped in the same 5 minutes and that she could now hear it breathing. Her apartment was found empty. A single, shattered blue mug was on the kitchen floor. Some stories of déjà vu feel like they are our own. Others, like Maria's, feel like an external force trapping us. But our third story asks an even more unsettling question. What if the memories you're experiencing don't belong to you, but to someone else who wore your face? This is the story of David and a trip to a town he'd never visited, but had somehow already lived in. David was a historian, a man who loved exploring forgotten places. On a whim, he took a trip to a small, isolated town in New England called Sparrows Creek, a place he'd only read about in old books. The moment he drove into the town square, he felt it. Not the violent jolt Alex or Maria felt, but a gentle, pervasive sense of homecoming. He knew that the bakery on the corner had the best apple turnovers. He knew that the third step of the library was loose. He knew that if he took the alleyway behind the post office, it would open up into a small, beautiful garden. He tested his feelings. He went to the bakery. The old woman behind the counter smiled warmly. "The usual, James?" she asked. David was taken aback. "My name is David." The woman's smile faltered. She looked confused, squinting at him. "Oh, forgive me, dear. You look so much like a young man who used to live here." James, a spitting image. Shaken, David continued his walk. He went to the library, and sure enough, the third step groaned under his weight. Inside, the librarian gave him the same strange, familiar look. This was more than déjà vu. It was as if he was walking through someone else's life. This was an unexplained phenomena that defied all logic. Host. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a growing sense of fear, David started digging. He spent the afternoon in the library's archives, looking through old newspapers. He searched for the name James, and he found him, James Abernathy. Born 1952, disappeared 1975. Then he found the photo. Staring back at him from the faded newsprint was his own face. It was absolutely, undeniably him, just in older, 1970s attire. The article detailed James' sudden and mysterious disappearance. He was a beloved member of the community who simply vanished one autumn night, leaving all his belongings behind. No note, no trace. A cold dread washed over David. He wasn't just visiting a town. He was walking in the footsteps of his own doppelganger. On a final, terrifying impulse, he looked up the Abernathy family address. He walked to the edge of town, to an old, slightly neglected house. It felt more familiar than his own home. He walked up the porch steps. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust motes danced in the fading light. He walked through the living room into the study. He ran his hand along a bookshelf and stopped. He knew, somehow, that there was a loose floorboard right here. He pried it up. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal. James Abernathy's journal. With trembling hands, David opened it. He read about James' life, his friends, his love for the town. But the last few entries were different. They were filled with fear and confusion. James wrote about having strange dreams. Dreams of another life in another time. He wrote about seeing a strange car, a silver sedan, driving into town. He wrote about seeing a man who looked just like him, but wore strange clothes, walking his streets, talking to his friends. The final entry, dated the night he disappeared, was a single, chilling sentence. "He's here. The man from my dreams is walking up to my house. He has my face." David dropped the journal. He was not the reincarnation of James. He was the ghost that had haunted him. He was living in a time loop from the other side, a paradox with no beginning and no end. He had walked into his own ghost story. One person experiencing a glitch in time is terrifying. An entire family experiencing it together is a nightmare. Our final story is about the Harrison family and the house that remembered a tragedy it was desperate to repeat. It was their dream home. Mark, Susan, and their 2 young children, Emily and Josh. A big house in a quiet suburb with a huge backyard. From the moment they moved in, though, things were strange. But the strangeness was coated in a layer of familiarity. Mark would go to fix a flickering light in the hallway, and he'd know, without looking, that the wiring was loose behind a specific panel. Susan was cooking in the kitchen and reached for a spice on a high shelf she couldn't see, her hand going right to the paprika as if she'd done it 1,000 times. The kids felt it too. Young Josh complained that he kept having a repeat dream about falling down the main staircase. Emily told her parents she missed playing with her friend Lily, a girl who she insisted used to live in her room. These weren't individual moments of déjà vu. It was a shared, collective experience. The house was imprinting itself on them, seeding them with memories that were not their own. It was a subtle but deeply unsettling form of unexplained phenomena. Host, Mark and Susan, being rational people, decided to do some research on the house history. They learned that the previous owners were the Peterson family, a couple with their 2 children named Leo and Lily. They had died in the house 5 years earlier. A fire. A tragic accident that had claimed all 4 of them. The official report stated the fire started from faulty electrical wiring in the hallway. In the panic and darkness, the mother had tripped and fallen down the main staircase. The entire house was engulfed in minutes. The Harrisons were horrified. They were living in a house that held the echoes of immense pain and tragedy. And those echoes were getting louder. The feeling of déjà vu intensified. They weren't just knowing where things were anymore. They were experiencing phantom emotions. Mark would be in the hallway and feel a sudden, paralyzing fear. Susan would be near the stairs and feel a phantom pain in her ankle. The house wasn't just a place. It was a recording, and they were the needle dragging across the vinyl, replaying the terrible song. The climax came during a thunderstorm one night. The power cut out, plunging the house into darkness. The only light was the occasional flash of lightning. The light in the hallway began to flicker again, this time erratically from the storm. Mark, on autopilot, his mind clouded with a memory that wasn't his, said, "I've got to fix that wire." He started for the hallway. At the same time, Susan heard a noise from upstairs. She rushed towards the main staircase, her foot landing on the exact step that always creaked. In the dark, a flash of lightning illuminated her face, and it was a mask of sheer terror. She wasn't just Susan anymore. She was remembering being someone else. Downstairs, Mark felt an inexplicable jolt, as if from a live wire. Upstairs, Susan felt her ankle twist. The children were crying in their rooms. The house was alive, and it was pulling them into its memory. The tragedy was reenacting itself, using the Harrisons as its new cast. The déjà vu was no longer a memory. It was a script, and they were being forced to play their parts, right up to the final, horrifying act. The story, as it was told, ends there, leaving us to wonder if they managed to break the cycle, or if the house claimed another family, doomed to have their own tragedy become the next echo in the walls. A glitch in the brain. A warning from the future. A prison of time. A memory from another life. Déjà vu can be so many things. For most of us, it remains a fleeting, harmless curiosity. But as these stories suggest, perhaps we should be more careful. Perhaps these moments are cracks in the fabric of our reality, giving us a terrifying glimpse of what lies beyond. The next time you're hit with that wave of familiarity, that feeling that you've already been here, already done this, take a moment. Look closer. What is it that you're truly remembering? And is it a memory you want to relive? If these stories send a chill down your spine, please show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel for more explorations into the unknown. Have you ever had a disturbing experience with déjà vu? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to read them. Stay curious and stay safe.